Ah, so you want to hear about the humans in Glacier 7? I adjust my thermal regulator, chuckling as the memory crystals in my cranial ridges shimmer with amusement. Well, grab a seat and order yourself a plasma drink. This is going to be good. I should introduce myself. I am Ambassador Crixel of the Galactic Council, and I had the distinct pleasure, or should I say, the absolute shock of witnessing the most entertaining disaster turned triumph in our sector's history. You see, Glacier 7 wasn't just a frozen planet. It was the frozen planet. The kind of place that made your thermal regulators freeze solid and your survival pods malfunction before you could say critical system failure. Surface temperatures averaged -230 standard units, with winds that could strip the protective coating off a battle cruiser. The Galactic Council had classified it as a Class X dead world. No chance of colonization, no possibility of resource extraction, no hope for survival. The place was so hostile that we used it as a benchmark for testing the most advanced survival technology in the galaxy. And by testing, I mean watching extremely expensive equipment turn into extremely expensive ice sculptures. But surely someone must have survived there, you might ask. Ha! The survival record before the humans showed up was held by the Pyraxians, a species that literally has plasma for blood. They lasted 6 standard days before their emergency beacon went off. The rescue teams found them huddled in their ship, their plasma nearly solidified. The mechanoids from the Silicon Expanse, 4 days before their joints locked up. The energy beings from the quantum realm, 3 days before they had to admit that even pure energy can freeze. The Vulcanites, with their triple-layered heat shields and magma core survival suits, 2 days, and they left crying. Actually crying. Do you know how embarrassing it is to see a Vulcanite cry? Their tears turn into little balls of lava. We had such a good betting pool going too. Every time a new species would show up claiming they had cracked the code or developed the ultimate survival technology, we'd all gather in the Grand Observatory. The pools got quite impressive. I once saw a Zentarian bet their entire moon on a survival attempt. Lost it, of course. Had to move in with their parents. Quite the scandal. The rules were simple: land on Glacier 7, establish a basic outpost, and survive for 1 standard month. Sounds simple enough, right? Wrong. The planet had more tricks than a trickster god's birthday party. The storms would come out of nowhere, whipping up ice crystals sharp enough to cut through reinforced hull plating. The ground itself would crack and shift as methane geysers erupted without warning. And don't even get me started on the indigenous ice burrowers. Nasty things. Like to chew through power cables, with teeth made of crystallized hydrogen. We'd seen it all. Or at least we thought we had. The betting pool had gotten so routine that we'd started making side bets on the specific way each attempt would fail. Would it be equipment malfunction? Structural failure? Complete mental breakdown? The options were endless, and so was our entertainment. Then the humans showed up. Looking back, I should have known something was different when they filed their expedition request. Most species would submit hundreds of pages of technical specifications, environmental impact assessments, and survival protocols. The humans. They sent a 2-page document that mostly consisted of "we've got this," and what I later learned was something called smiley faces. I remember standing in the council chamber, holding their request, and laughing so hard my secondary respiratory system kicked in. These humans, barely out of their planetary system, with technology that would make a mechanoid apprentice blush, wanted to attempt Glacier 7? Well, who were we to deny ourselves another entertaining addition to our betting pool? The odds started at 10,000 to 1 against their survival. By the time their ship entered orbit, it had reached 1,000,000 to 1. If only we'd known then what we know now. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Would you like another drink? This story only gets better from here. Their ship was what caught our attention first. Or should I say, their ship, and yes, I'm making air quotes with all 4 of my upper appendages. The vessel looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and hope. The mechanoids in our observation team actually covered their optical sensors, claiming it was painful to look at. When Commander Maya Rodriguez stepped out for the initial diplomatic greeting, several council members snickered. She wore what appeared to be layers of fabric. Fabric. Not a single powered thermal suit or energy shield in sight. Just layers of something they called wool, and down behind her, Lieutenant Blake Thompson was carrying what they called supplies in containers made of, I still can't believe this, actual dead trees. "Welcome to Galactic Central Station," Director Xanth said, trying to keep a straight face. "We've prepared the standard survival briefing for Glacius 7 attempts." Commander Rodriguez smiled, and this is important, because no species has ever smiled before a Glacius 7 attempt. "Thank you, but we've done our homework. We'll just need clearance to begin our descent." The briefing room erupted in what humans would call barely contained laughter. I watched as Commander Rodriguez's team unloaded their equipment. No plasma drills, no quantum heaters, no automated survival pods. Instead, they brought things called sleds, ice axes, and something that particularly confused us, hot chocolate packets. "Those must be some kind of advanced chemical heating units," one of our scientists whispered. "No," Lieutenant Thompson replied, overhearing us. "It's just a nice warm drink, great for morale." Morale? On Glacius 7? The betting odds jumped to 2,000,000 to 1. The real entertainment began when they started their preparations. While most species spent weeks programming their AI systems and calibrating their environmental suits, the humans spent their time doing physical exercises. They would run laps around the station, lift heavy objects repeatedly, and engage in something they called winter survival training. The council member Plix, who had bet his prized collection of quantum butterflies on their failure, couldn't contain himself. Are they preparing for survival or for some primitive fitness ritual? But it was their habitat construction plans that really sent the council into hysterics. Instead of the standard titanium alloy survival domes with triple redundant power systems, they planned to build something called an igloo. When they explained it was essentially a shelter made of frozen water, 3 council members had to be treated for shock. "You're going to live in frozen water on a frozen planet?" I asked, certain I had misunderstood. "Best insulation there is," Commander Rodriguez replied with that same confident smile. "Been working for humans for thousands of years." The day before their descent, I felt compelled to speak up. Perhaps it was a sense of diplomatic duty, or maybe I just didn't want to watch another species turn into a cautionary tale. "Commander," I said, pulling her aside, "you do understand that the last 17 attempts ended in failure, and they had technology centuries ahead of whatever this is." I gestured at their wooden crates and fabric clothing. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Ambassador Crixel, sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Besides, she winked another peculiarly human gesture. "We've got something none of your previous attempts had." "And what's that?" I asked, dreading some delusional answer. "Experience with winter camping." "Trust me, Glacius 7 has nothing on a Minnesota winter." I had no idea what a Minnesota was, but I made a note to research it later. As their ship prepared for descent, the betting pool reached its highest point ever. The Quantum Collective bet the rights to 3 star systems on their failure within the first day. We all settled in to watch what we assumed would be the shortest survival attempt in Glacius 7's history. None of us could have predicted what happened next. The first thing the humans did after landing was completely ignore all standard survival protocols. While our observation team watched in horror, they spent hours stomping around in the snow, packing it into blocks. Commander Rodriguez called it testing the consistency. We called it madness. "They're dead within 6 hours," Council Member Plix declared, already counting his winnings. "No one exposed to Glacius 7's atmosphere survives without sealed environments." But something strange happened. They didn't die. Their primitive fabric suits, which they called parkas and snow pants, somehow kept them warm enough to work. Lieutenant Thompson explained they used multiple layers to trap air, creating insulation. The concept was so simple it was brilliant, and I hate admitting that. The construction of their base defied all logic. No power tools, no force fields, no automated systems, just humans working together, building what looked like a circle of snow blocks. The mechanoids in our observation team nearly short-circuited trying to understand why anyone would choose such an inefficient method. "Look at how they waste energy," one Vulcanite observer commented. "All that physical movement when they could simply deploy automated constructors." Then we watched in astonishment as they completed their first igloo. The geometry was perfect, the structural integrity remarkable, and most shocking of all, the interior temperature remained stable even as outside conditions plummeted to lethal levels. "But how will they generate power?" someone asked. Their equipment is practically ancient. The humans had brought something called solar thermal generators and wind turbines when I pointed out that Glacius 7 storms would tear apart anything exposed to the elements. Commander Rodriguez just grinned. That's why we brought spare parts and repair tools. Sometimes the best technology is the kind you can fix with a wrench. By day 3, other alien species began showing up just to watch. The humans had established not 1, but 3 igloos, connected by tunnels they dug through the snow. They set up what they called a greenhouse. Using clear panels and artificial lighting, growing actual plants in the middle of this frozen wasteland. The betting pool was in chaos. No one knew what to make of these humans who seemed to thrive on doing everything the hard way. They didn't even use automated food synthesizers. Instead, they cooked meals using something called a camp stove, gathering in their main igloo to share hot food and drinks. It's about more than just survival, Lieutenant Thompson told me during one of my observation visits. It's about making a home. I watched as they established daily routines. They took turns on watch duty monitoring weather conditions using devices that looked like they belonged in a museum. They maintained their equipment with physical tools instead of repair nanites. They even set up a warning system for storms using nothing more than flags and wind direction indicators. Most puzzling of all was their attitude. They seemed to be enjoying themselves. During their downtime, they would sit around telling stories, playing games with marked pieces of paper called cards, and singing songs. On a planet that could freeze your blood solid. The key to surviving extreme conditions isn't just about having the best technology, Commander Rodriguez explained to me one day. It's about maintaining morale and working together. A happy crew is a successful crew. The council was baffled. Their primitive methods were working, but none of our experts could explain why. The quantum collective ran millions of simulations trying to understand how such basic technology could function in these conditions. The mechanoids sent drones to scan their structures, convinced they must be hiding advanced technology somewhere. But no, it was just humans being humans. They adapted to problems as they arose. When an ice burrower chewed through their power lines, they didn't call for emergency evacuation like any sensible species would. Instead, Lieutenant Thompson went out with a tool called a shovel, dug up the damaged cable, and fixed it by hand. In a blizzard. By the end of the first week, I noticed a subtle shift in the observation team's attitudes. The mockery had been replaced by curiosity. Even Council Member Plick stopped making snide comments about their primitive ways. After watching them successfully rescue their wind turbine from an ice storm using nothing but ropes and teamwork, the betting pool had gone silent. No one wanted to place new bets because, for the first time in Glacius 7's history, we weren't watching a survival attempt. We were watching a masterclass in adaptation and ingenuity. And somewhere along the way, I realized we had all missed something obvious. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. But don't tell the humans I said that. They're insufferable enough already. On day 10, our monitoring systems detected what we'd all been waiting for: the biggest storm in Glacius 7's recorded history. Winds powerful enough to toss a shuttle like a toy. Temperatures dropping so low they broke our measurement scales. This was it, the moment when reality would finally catch up with human overconfidence. The betting pool exploded back to life. Finally, Council Member Plix exclaimed, rubbing his appendages together. Nature will show these primitives why advanced technology exists. Even I had to admit, the situation looked grim. Previous species had lost their entire bases to storms half this size. When we informed Commander Rodriguez about the approaching catastrophe, her response was not what we expected. "Thanks for the heads up. Time to batten down the hatches." Batten down the what? I asked, certain our translation matrix had malfunctioned. The humans sprang into action with what they called their storm protocols. Instead of activating force fields or emergency teleporters, they began piling more snow around their igloos. They strung heavy ropes between buildings, creating guidelines. They moved their vehicles into sheltered ice caves. Most bizarrely, they seemed excited. "Perfect time to test our reinforcements," Lieutenant Thompson said, securing extra blocks of compressed snow around their structures. "Maya, want to break out the emergency chocolate rations." The storm hit like a gravitational collapse. Our observation instruments went dark almost immediately. The last images we received showed the humans retreating into their igloos, pulling sleds loaded with supplies through the growing whiteout. Several council members turned away, unable to watch what they assumed would be the end of another failed attempt. For 3 days, Glacier 7 was wrapped in chaos. The storm was so severe it disrupted even our orbital monitoring systems. The betting pool reached fever pitch, with species wagering entire star systems on how little would be left of the human base. The mechanoids calculated a 99.9999% chance of total destruction. When the storm finally cleared, we scrambled to re-establish visual contact. The observation room was packed. Even Director Xanth showed up, though he claimed he was just passing by. The first images made everyone gasp. The human base was still there, not just surviving, but practically untouched. Impossible Plix slammed all 6 appendages on his console. Check the sensors. The sensors were working perfectly. As we watched in stunned silence, the main igloo's door opened, and out stepped Commander Rodriguez, carrying what appeared to be a hot beverage. Warning everyone, she waved at our cameras. Hope you didn't worry too much. We had quite the party in here. A party. During the worst storm ever recorded on Glacier 7, they had a party. The humans emerged one by one, immediately starting their post-storm procedures. They checked their structures, repaired minor damage to their wind turbines, and even managed to recover equipment that had been buried under new snowdrifts. Lieutenant Thompson was singing something about dashing through the snow while he worked. When I led the first inspection team down to the surface, I couldn't help but ask how. How did you survive that storm? Commander Rodriguez handed me a cup of what she called hot chocolate, which, by the way, is now highly sought after in galactic trading markets. Simple physics, Ambassador. The storm actually helped us. All that extra snow piled up around our structures created additional insulation. The worse it got out here, the more protected we were in there. The inspection team's reports caused an uproar in the council. The humans hadn't just survived, they had thrived. Their igloo design had proven more storm-resistant than any artificial shelter we'd ever tested. Their primitive wind turbines, designed to fold down during high winds, were already back in operation. Even their greenhouse was intact, protected by its carefully planned location and snow barrier design. But what really caught everyone's attention was how they'd spent the storm. While our species would have huddled in suspended animation chambers or emergency stasis pods, the humans gathered in their main igloo, sharing food, playing games, and maintaining what they called storm diaries for future reference. They turned a survival situation into a social event. The betting pool suffered its first major collapse in history. Nobody could process what they were seeing. The quantum collective's probability matrices crashed trying to calculate how this had happened. The mechanoids began quietly downloading data about human construction techniques. That was when we first saw real respect in the eyes of the council members. Not just surprise or curiosity, but genuine respect. These humans, with their outdated methods and primitive technology, had done something none of us thought possible. They hadn't just survived Glacier 7's worst storm, they had made it look easy. As I watched Commander Rodriguez and her team casually going about their post-storm tasks, I realized we had completely misjudged these humans. We had mistaken simplicity for primitiveness and physical effort for inefficiency. The storm hadn't just tested their survival skills, it had shattered our preconceptions. And they still had 20 more days to geodot. After surviving the storm, the humans did something that boggled our collective minds. They expanded their operation. Not out of necessity, but because, as Lieutenant Thompson put it, we've got all this great snow, might as well use it. The betting pool, already in shambles, took on a strange new form. Instead of betting on when the humans would fail, species started betting on what impossible thing they'd do next. They rarely disappointed. First came their discovery of the deep ice caves. Previous expeditions had marked them as dead zones, but Commander Rodriguez insisted on exploring them. These formations remind me of glacial caves back home, she said, gearing up with what looked like spikes attached to her boots and primitive tools. What they found down there changed everything. The caves weren't just hollow spaces in the ice, they contained concentrated deposits of quantum crystals, the purest anyone had ever seen. The very same crystals our most advanced mining equipment couldn't reach because of the extreme conditions. How did you know? I asked Commander Rodriguez as her team carefully extracted another perfect specimen. She shrugged. That infuriating human gesture of casual competence. We didn't. But when you spend enough time exploring ice caves on Earth, you learn to spot certain patterns. Plus, she grinned, these formations look just like the ones where we find geodes back home. But the real shock came when they started their recreational activities one morning. We noticed humans sliding down the steep ice slopes on primitive boards they called skis and snowboards. The observation room was chaos. They're deliberately throwing themselves down frozen mountains. Council member Plix watched in horror. For entertainment. You should see what we do with half-pipes, Lieutenant Thompson shouted up at our cameras before launching himself off a self-made ramp, spinning through the air in what they called a 360. The humans had built what they called a winter sports complex next to their base. They set up courses for something called cross-country skiing, marked trails for snowshoeing, and even created an area for what they termed ice climbing. All of this using nothing but basic tools and their seemingly endless enthusiasm for putting themselves in gravity-defying situations. That's when the unexpected happened. Aliens started asking to visit. Not to study or observe, but to participate. The first was a young mechanoid engineer who requested permission to learn skiing within a week. We had a waiting list. The humans, far from being territorial, welcomed everyone with open arms and something they called hot toddy. Commander Rodriguez set up proper training sessions. Soon, the sight of vulcanites awkwardly snowshoeing across the plains, or quantum beings trying to grasp the concept of snow angels became common. Even Director Xanth was spotted taking secret skiing lessons. The humans introduced something called Winter Olympics, pitting different species against each other in various snow and ice activities. The betting pool transformed again, now focused on which alien would face plant most spectacularly during the slalom event. But it wasn't just about sports. The humans had somehow turned Glacius 7 from a deadly challenge into a thriving community. Their greenhouse technology, laughably simple by our standards, proved remarkably effective. They were growing plants that shouldn't have been possible in these conditions. The secret Lieutenant Thompson explained while teaching a group of Zentarians how to build a snow fort is working with the environment, not against it. You've got all this snow and ice, it's not your enemy, it's your building material. Their base became a strange mix of research station, sports complex, and what they called a cozy winter retreat. They set up regular game nights, where different species would gather to learn human card games and share stories. The sound of alien laughter mixing with human jokes became a regular occurrence. Council member Plix, who had lost more bets than anyone else, finally admitted defeat in spectacular fashion, during what the humans called a graduation ceremony. From ski school, he stood up and declared, "These humans are either the craziest or the most brilliant species we've ever encountered, possibly both." Looking back, I think that was the moment when everything changed. We had come expecting to document another failure. Instead, we were witnessing the birth of something entirely new, a way of not just surviving, but actually enjoying one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. And through it all, Commander Rodriguez and her team just kept going about their business, as if turning a deadly frozen planet into an interstellar winter resort was the most natural thing in the universe. The most infuriating part? They made it look fun. The truth came out during what the humans called a bonfire night. Yes, they actually built a controlled fire on the ice. Several council members had gathered around it, wrapped in human-designed winter gear, sipping hot chocolate and something called marshmallows. "You mean to tell us," Director Xanth said, nearly dropping his drink, "that Earth has multiple climate zones, all on one planet?" Commander Rodriguez nodded, turning her marshmallow over the flame. "Yep, desert, tropics, temperate zones, and Arctic regions. Some places go through all 4 seasons in a year. One day it's sunny and hot, the next you're shoveling snow off your driveway." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ice burrowers stopped their usual chattering. "That's impossible," Council member Plix whispered. "No species could evolve under such chaotic conditions." Lieutenant Thompson laughed. "That's exactly why we evolved to be adaptable. When your planet keeps changing its mind about the weather, you learn to roll with the punches." The implications hit us like a quantum surge. Humans hadn't survived Glacius 7 because they had better technology or stronger bodies. They had survived because, to them, adapting to extreme conditions wasn't extraordinary, it was Tuesday. Our ancestors, Commander Rodriguez explained, warming her hands by the fire, went from hunting in the snow to crossing deserts to sailing oceans, not because we had special powers, but because we had to. We learned, we adapted, we figured things out. The Galactic Council called an emergency session right there on Glacius 7, a first in our history. The humans had broken our entire classification system. How do you categorize a species that treats hostile environments as vacation spots? We need to understand, Director Xanth declared during the session. Now wearing a knitted hat the humans called a beanie, how this changes our perception of technological advancement. Commander Rodriguez stood before the council, still in her simple snow gear. With all due respect, Director, maybe technology isn't always about having the most advanced gadgets. Sometimes it's about having the right tools for the job and knowing how to use them. She pointed to their base. Those igloos? That's thousands of years of human engineering, perfected by people who needed to survive in the cold. Our winter gear? Countless generations of trial and error, finding out what works. We didn't survive here. Despite our primitive technology, we survived because our technology evolved from real-world needs. I watched the faces of my fellow council members as understanding dawned. We had been so focused on advancing beyond our environments that we had forgotten the value of working with them. The betting pool, that great institution of galactic entertainment, transformed one final time. Now, species were betting on which of their own ancient survival techniques they could rediscover and adapt. Looking at the humans going about their daily lives on this supposedly uninhabitable planet, I felt an emotion I hadn't experienced in centuries: humility. We had judged their methods as primitive because they didn't match our definition of advancement. We had dismissed their knowledge because it didn't come from quantum computers or AI systems. "You know what your problem is," Commander Rodriguez said to me later, as we watched a group of mechanoids attempting to build their first igloo. "You all tried to conquer Glacius 7. We just wanted to live here." And there it was, the final revelation. Sometimes the most advanced solution is the one that's been around the longest. You just have to be humble enough to see it.